Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning.
Yes.
And good morning, Mike.
Hello, Metaphysical Mike. Welcome to Talking Niagara on Election Day.
Election day it is, yes. Yeah. My computer wouldn't just behave itself. Because I'm writing Windows 11. Windows 11 likes to put your browsers in particular positions on the window. But when I'm running the show, I have the pictures on my left-hand screen and my comments on the right-hand screen so that I can follow them along. Comments and banners and things like that on the right-hand screen. And it wasn't letting me put it in place. All right, so welcome to Talking Niagara. It's April 28th, 2025. It's voting day. So our election, I don't know about where you are, but for me, the voting station is River of Life Church Ministries on Stanley Avenue. Never been in that place. It used to be Comedy Club, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Yep, one time it used to be Comedy Club. But election polls are open 9:30 to 9:30. So yeah, I wish they would open at 6 o'clock.
Everyone.
I wish they would open at 6 o'clock in the morning. Right? They should open at 6 o'clock in the morning till 9:30. And because it can be awkward for people.
Yeah, definitely. When I was working, sometimes we'd have very long shifts.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Ideally, you're supposed to be given the right to go and vote.
Oh, I know, but there's being given the right and there's having the time to take that right.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
that's the problem. And believe me, in the work that I did, you couldn't do it.
Yeah,
you're on a job, you're at a construction job, and you got to get something done. You got to leave for a couple hours to go vote.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's the same. It's the same here. Pretty well every job I've ever worked in, it's like you don't get to. I vote either first thing or very last thing. It's about where I am, and that's why I say that you should be voting. You should have, you should have it from first thing in the morning. Yeah, and everybody get out. It's the only time your opinion matters. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Yes. Well, we expect that I believe there's going to be a very large turnout. I think the conservatives are underrated. I don't think they'll win the election, but I think there's going to be a lot more conservatives come out. I don't think the polls have done them justice, although lately it seems that they've closed the gap. But in Ontario, it still seems that Liberals have the edge, and that's the problem. It's just going to decide it one way or the other.
Yeah.
And I never trust the polls, particularly when it comes to conservatives.
Yeah. Okay, so before we go on to election, let's just pause for a moment. 11 people were killed over the weekend in a Vancouver street festival. In violence at a Vancouver street festival. Somebody drove an SUV up onto the platform and mowed 11 people down.
Yeah, this is very sad, particularly because they had thought of putting up barriers to stop something like this. It was actually like crash trucks and barriers were proposed, and the city or whoever the officials were thought, well, that's nothing. We don't have to worry about that with a Filipino festival because nobody has a whole lot of problems with Filipinos. So they're not going to be a terrorist mark. They're not going to be a mark of hatred of any kind. But what they didn't think of is just somebody that's nuts. And it's so sad because they could have had those barriers up. And from now on, every kind of street festival will have to have them. And I'm really disappointed that they didn't put them up as precautionary in any case because we've seen that situation happen in Germany lately, where somebody did the same thing, where they were actually even a little bit more prepared for something like that, where they had a person with a SUV. And of course, we had it happen. What was it? New Orleans too.
Yeah.
So to me, they did not put up the precautions that they should have, because they felt that it was unnecessary. Well, seriously, when we have usually you got a lot of copycats when something like this has happened. This has happened in the States and in Germany, and they figure, oh, well, it's not going to happen because everybody loves the Filipinos. Well, what they didn't think of is just a complete.
I wouldn't say everybody loves Filipinos, and it's yes, I'm pretty sure everybody on our show does love Filipinos. My brother-in-law is married to a Filipino. A lot of people do love Filipinos. But there are, as with any minority group, there are people who don't like them.
Well, I can't tell you anyone I have ever met ever had anything to say wrong about Filipinos, except that, except where they.
I'm just saying that there was, with every group, there's always people who don't like them.
Oh, possibly. But in this particular case, it was so unlikely. If it was a Jewish or Palestinian festival, they would have had all kinds of stuff up for the obvious reasons. But what's happened in mass murders with cars these days, it hasn't always been politically motivated. And that's where they made the mistake. They're looking at politically motivated terrorist type actions in a festival. And well, all we had was somebody that's off their lid that did this. And well known to the police as well. Now, I don't think they've ever expected them to do something like this, but still, the precautions were waved to the wind, and this is a big problem for me, because it was proposed. Do we put up crash trucks and barriers? And they said, "Oh, wow, no, that's an unnecessary expense." Seriously?
Well, it goes to prove that anything like this, you've got to take extra precautions, because those 11 people did not deserve to die.
No. Oh, and nobody deserves to die in such cases, no matter what ethnic group they're from. And
exactly.
I mean, geez. When I read that, I thought to myself, oh, here's another guy that somehow got past the barriers, like in Germany. The guy in Germany found a way of getting through the barriers, and a weakness they had in the barriers. Well, they didn't even put them up. There was no crash trucks or anything, it seems to me, in this particular case. And that's the real tragedy, is they could have had these, that they could have been more cautious. And I guess the fact that they figured, oh, well, it's just a festival, nobody's going to bug these people, and sadly,
the good thing is that this happened at 8 p.m. when the Lapu Lapu Day block party was winding down, because there would have been a lot more people likely earlier in the day.
Yeah, well, when you have, I read 12 people were dead, but maybe it's just 11, but just 11.
Well, it's 11 or 12. 11 or 12. It's 11 or 12 people that didn't need to be dead or injured.
Yeah, and there was, I think there's 20 some injured badly. So, and the youngest being 5 years old, a 5-year-old child taken from us, and so needlessly. I mean, what kind of a world we live in here now? It's driving me mad. Anyway, there's a great tragedy, and I think Vancouver will take a long time to recover from this particular incident. And I don't know. It just shows you that you don't have to have a gun to be a mass murderer. I mean, it's easier if you have a gun, but it's you find a way of doing these things. And like I said before, when there is already a trend and there's going to be copycatters, when the incident happened in the States and in Germany and the States, and it's already being shown that, and we also had that incident happen in Toronto, although it wasn't a festival, where a guy mowed down 14 acres. Remember that? And
yeah.
So when they try to plan for one of these things, obviously they thought, well, the Filipino community isn't one of those communities that's going to be targeted by terrorists, so we don't have to really take super precautions. They're not factoring the general nutcase that just wants to do damage, whatever damage that is, and doesn't really care what ethnic group or whatever they are.
Yeah, no, they need to take more precautions on this sort of thing, right?
And as crazy as this guy is supposed to be, he's supposed to be a person that Vancouver.
Mike is saying that Niagara Falls tourist zone area down near the falls would also be a prime spot for this type of insanity.
Oh yes, oh yes. Somebody could really go nuts down there.
Yeah.
Wow. And particularly if it's crowded along the wall there, where would people escape to?
No, exactly. You drive a truck up in certain parts of there, and fortunately there's barriers all the way down that side, down the waterfront side, which is a good thing because it limits area where cars can get in, but there's still an area where cars could get in at a certain point.
Yeah, I feel now that you've mentioned that, with all when nutters do the copycat thing, you may have an incident there.
And when you've got things like, you see, one of the things about why an SUV, SUV has got higher tires, you can bump the curb, right?
Yeah. Gosh, you could do that with any kind of vehicle, though.
Yeah, you're more likely to get trapped on in a normal standard saloon car. You're more likely to get trapped on the curb. One tire will get trapped.
Well, the fact if that's all if you have mental problems and that's what you're going to do, any car will do.
I get it. Yeah,
I've
never looked and seen a Filipino people all over the ground. Yeah. A flock of people all over the ground. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad and so tragic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you're going to get a lot of people who are gun enthusiasts in the States saying, see, it doesn't matter if you've got a gun or not. You can do that kind of damage.
That's true. Well, that's true, and that's what I was going to say anyway. Because, if you're in America, you can get guns. If you're in other parts of the world where handguns are not permitted, you just mow them down with SUVs. There, that's the attitude that unfortunately our society's gotten to.
Yeah, sadly,
bad. Yeah,
sadly, it's easier to do a mass murder with guns, but if you don't have a gun, there's other ways of doing it.
Personally, yes, I've got an SUV. I couldn't even possibly imagine doing that. I'm extra careful around people, with a car that's much higher up. I always find that, like, I look at particularly kids. There's a certain point whereby I cannot see them so well in a car where you've got a higher, you're up higher.
Yes.
Right.
So it's I don't know. It's
yeah,
just pretty damn sad.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to election day, since it's a main thrust of where we are today. So in election news, basically there's a number of things going on. I saw this point about I'm Jewish Canadian and I won't be voting Conservative. Then also the National Post put out a thing which is saying this election is about an existential threat for Jewish Canadians.
Well, I put up the one. I read an opinion article. I think I found it in the review,
Yeah.
where a progressive Jewish fellow uh, tried to say that the Jews are not singular minded. They have a mind of their
Well, I
own.
wouldn't
They're
expect
not.
them to be. Yeah.
Well, the impression is, and his problem with the progressives, or for the progressive conservatives, is they're sort of painting the idea that uh, that the Jewish population of Canada will, of those of ethnic background of Jewish background, they're Canadians, right? That will automatically vote for the progressive conservatives, and he points out that more than 70% of the that of Jews think that the Gaza thing is bad. They should have a ceasefire, and that they are not too happy with the Israeli government withholding, particularly essential food and so on, and is not in alignment with the slurs of against UNRWA. So he points out that Jewish Canadians will be voting on a number of things, not that one particular issue,
Yeah.
and even that particular issue, they have different mind to it. So he wanted to point that out, that Jewish Canadians are not a block of
Oh,
singular
I
motivated.
wouldn't expect them to be anyway. I would not expect that to be the case.
You wouldn't, but
No.
he takes issue with the fact that the progressive conservatives are sent or are are putting that out there, that that's what they will do. That, you know, if you vote for the press conservatives, you'll be supporting the Jewish community more than
Yeah.
if the liberals. So or whatever other
Well,
party.
I think that you vote according to according to the party that supports your personal your personal viewpoint, your personal belief system. And whilst religious communities do, it's true that religious communities do tend to support more conservative more conservative candidates. It's not globally true. In fact, there's progressive Jews, progressive Islamics, and the like that will vote against the normal traditional traditional values that many of their community will follow.
Yeah, he points out here, though, he says that there's been a rise in anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about that, because the kind of anti-Semitism that I know is one of just kind of complete hate for the ethnic people of ethnic Jews. I think a lot of the anti-Israeli and anti-Zionist rhetoric is misinterpreted as anti-Semitism. Surely there are true anti-Semites that will criticize Zionism and the Israeli government, but for the most part, people who do, including Jews, there's lots of Jews who criticize the Israeli government, Zionist
Of course.
movement.
Of course.
However, if you're a non-Jew and you do criticize them, then you are painted with the anti-Semitic brush. So he points out that there is as much anti-Islamic phobia and a large mark of anti-Palestinian. If you look at the newspapers, they always are talking about anti-Semitism, but not the anti-Palestinian thing that's been happening as well. We've had, shootings and stabbings of Palestinians,
Yeah.
and or Arabs. And as a matter of fact, when a Jewish guy shot two other Jews who he thought were Palestinians, those two Jews that were shot and survived, the first thing they did was say death to Arabs, and not realizing that another Jewish person had shot them. So there is just as much of this preposterous prejudice on
Well,
all sides here. And he points that out.
The interesting thing is, a few months ago, somebody said, I heard this story. Somebody was saying that that if you check the DNA of many of the Arabs that live in the area, they're identical to the DNA of many of the Jews that live in that area. Okay, it was you that said that, yeah.
Yeah, there's a claim that DNA testing is illegal in Israel, because they don't want that to start to happen, where Jews that have come back into or emigrated into Israel will find that their Muslim and Christian counterparts in the country were actually relatives of them DNA wise, and they don't want to muddy the waters, basically. So they want that ethno-religious division, but the ethnic part may not be, may be a little bit different. As a matter of fact, the Jewish guy that shot what he thought were Palestinians, shot them because they looked like Arabs, because they were Mizrata Jews. But aside from that, there's a lot of over the top hatred going on, and Jewish people will always have to be very worried all the time, because it is traditional in European Christendom to dislike Jews.
Yeah.
Based on their Jewishness, based on their race. And you don't get that in the Muslim countries that don't will be fighting Zionists in the Zionist movement, and don't have any particular problem with the race of a Semitic race of Jewish people. They have it on their problem is mostly Zionism. And we found that all the different Islamic empires and so on during the same time of European Christendom rising, that Jews were much more welcome in the Islamic countries than they were in Europe. As a matter of fact, when the Spanish threw Jews out of their country, they were welcomed in the Ottoman Empire. Not to say they were equal citizens, but Christians and Jews fared much better in Muslim areas than Jews did in Christian areas.
Yeah. Okay, so another issue about this is, since about 1867, about 78% of provincial elections in Ontario have been won by the party ideologically different from the federal governing party. And the interesting thing is about this is that if you look at if you look at Ontario, we had 80 seats won by the Conservatives, 27 by the NDP, 14 by the Liberals, and 2 by Green in the provincial election. Yet at the moment, it's looking like 82. They're projecting 82 seats to the Liberals, 37 to Conservative, and two to NDP, and one to Green in Ontario. Right, so we got a complete switch, Aru, of where everybody's voting.
Yeah, this is called alternation.
Yeah, exactly.
The theory that the Ontario population will see what kind of party there is federally, and will have a tendency to vote for the opposite party provincially. I really don't think there's much to that. I think it's more of a coincidence than anything. We found that Doug Ford basically had the confidence of most Ontario voters, because they didn't even show up to vote. If they don't even show up to vote, they don't want change. Yeah. They don't want anything to change. And that was a bunch of different reasons. For one thing, the Liberals and the NDP really didn't have much of an alternative. And because people didn't really could find themselves enthusiastically backing the Liberals or the NDP, and maybe not didn't want to vote for the Conservatives just did not come to the election. I'm not so sure this theory holds water at all, although it seems to have been a tendency. Now, I don't know in previous elections how
well, they're basically saying that this has been true since 1867.
Yes, it's been true, but I think it's just coincidence. Although I have to say that I don't know what people in 1950s were thinking, or 60s were thinking when
True. How can you know what they were thinking? Because it's a very difficult thing, and we only held an election 2 months ago here in Ontario anyway, and at that time it was patently clear that that we were likely to be facing a federal election at this time anyway. So if you were going to vote the alternative, you'd have predictively voted the alternative and gone for the Liberals.
Well, we do remember that a lot of people said that was a motivation of Doug Ford to call the snap election that he did, because he was worried that the Conservatives would look, if the Conservatives won, that he may lose because he was a Conservative due to this alternation theory. I'm not so sure. I'm really not so sure. I think it was a smart move by Doug. I don't think it was a necessary move, but it was a smart move by Doug, politically speaking, because he knew there was going to be a bunch of confusion and upset around the federal election, and I don't think he wanted to pay the price for that. He also could see, I think, also he could see the future of the economy, and governments, provincial governments, and others are usually blamed for bad economies, and I think he could see there was potential disrupt to the economies coming forward. Although I don't think he thought it was as bad as it is right now because of the Trump factor.
Yeah, and at the moment when we're talking about the vote projection, the moment, remember this is a week old anyway, 43% they're projected for Liberals and 39% for Conservatives, and there's a 4% swing either way for both of those parties. The NDP have moved up a bit. They're now at 8% over and above the Bloc, but and current seat projections is for 186 today versus 124, with Bloc getting 23 and NDP 9. They're only projecting one Green, which is ironically likely to be the one in Ontario.
Well, there you go. And the Conservatives are surging in the polls right now. I think it's a little bit too late.
Yeah.
And as Doug Ford and the Conservatives have pointed out, the provincial Conservatives have pointed out that Pierre Poilievre did not pivot quick enough and kept with doing the sort of Trump talking points, or at least perceived to have done, and that slowed them down. Now they seem to have been getting on track, and they're gaining now, but it's a little too late, it looks like. We don't know.
Well, it's today that will tell. It's now is the real election out there. Now it's for people's opportunity to tell the political parties what they believe to be the right thing, right?
What are these comments?
Okay. Why is anti-Semitic given more attention? Why is anti-Semitic given more attention than other prejudices?
Because of its long history, particularly in European Christendom. European Christendom has.
I know.
It's been ironed into our culture and Western cultures, anti-Semitism. And there's traditionally, back in the day, all they were really worried about is Jews converting to Christianity. Then it would be all right. But around the 1500s or 1600s, this idea of a racial difference and this different race was malignant, and that unfortunately sort of locked in this tiresome, long, and regrettable history of anti-Semitism in Western culture.
And I'm going to say this, Gary, keep it clean. I'm not going to put your comment up there because you're not keeping it clean.
Hey, what do you say? What do you say, Gary? Yeah, keep it clean. All right. Was another rally.
Okay, so there is another thing. There is another thing here that we all. Okay, so right here, right in Niagara Falls, and even ironically in Niagara South, it looks like we've got two close elections here. Some of the closest polls in the country potentially sitting right here in this area. We sit in Niagara Falls. And Niagara on the Lake is likely to be decided on a few thousand votes. Very close.
Yeah, I think Baldinelli is being challenged more. I think Andrew Kaiser has a very good chance of upsetting Baldinelli because the NDP vote will probably shift towards the Liberal.
Yeah.
So
the other thing, of course, is that because with Niagara Center, what's called Niagara South now, Vance Badaway, the Liberal there, is fighting a very close race because of the addition of Fort Erie and the fact that is actually very, I think there's a lot of conservatives in the Fort Erie area.
Yeah, you go along the coast of Lake Erie. Once you start going west, I had to do that trip so often to the steel mill down there, and almost every sign you see anywhere was a conservative sign.
Yeah. I had to go somewhere out there this weekend, and yeah, there's a lot of signage for Fred Davis out there. Also interesting, the PPC person's got a number of signs up there. Peter Tarras.
When you get into the rural communities, you find a lot more PPC signs as well, where you don't really see too many in the city, but you will see a disproportionate amount of them in the rural communities, where people really want a very, very conservative type of party. You know, they're kind of analogous to the NDP, kind of.
Yeah. Ironically, Friday when I came home, there's a letter in my post box from the desk of Mark Carney, like I believe that. Well, right, asking us to vote for Andrea Kaiser.
Yeah. He sent me a dinner invitation too, you know.
Oh, you got invited as well, right?
Yeah.
Glad to see we can both go.
Yeah, no, I really didn't get it. I am expecting a phone call. Like it's a Trump G thing with me and Carney. He's got to phone me or I got to phone him. It's just kind of thing, you know. Who's going to lose face first?
Yeah. All right. So we've got close races here, right? That's for sure. Everything here is close. The other thing is that there's a pollster, Nick Nanos, who is basically saying over the weekend that he's saying everything is down to the wire. It's as close as you can ever call it.
I believe he's right. Whereas everyone else seems to think the Liberals have a huge edge. I don't think so. I think there's an undercurrent of conservative voters that will go out there and make it a real fight. Right now, as it looks, like other pollsters are saying, you know, that the Liberals have got an edge, even though they admit that the Conservatives are on the uptick right now, are moving up. Because of the amount of people that are showing up at the polls in early voting, a lot of experts say that indicates people are looking for a change, and so they come out and vote more more often. But in this particular case, we don't know if that's really the case
but
here.
Again, come on, Dave. We looked, 7.6 million people. This is a record number of people have gone out and voted early. It was a record number of people that voted early in the presidential elections, down south, and basically there was 1.5% between the votes down south.
Yeah,
right?
basically.
I
1.5, yeah. So down there, when the actual popular vote, Trump won 1.5% more than Kamala. So Kamala gets 49 and he gets 51, basically. It wasn't even that much, but that gives you an idea of the true number of voters. However, it is where the voters are voting, and that's in Canada too. So you could get 9,999 conservatives voting and 10,000 for liberals. So, I mean, anyone could have won those races depending on who comes out. And I believe the conservatives are going to come out in droves. And if the liberals don't come out in droves as well, it will be more conservative. Well, I believe there's going to be, I hope that there's only going to be a minority government. I don't want the liberals to get liberals or conservatives to get a majority, because if they don't have a majority, they will have to work together with these trade difficulties that we're having and our problems within the country. We have to have every voice to the table. Yeah. And so that's why I think, but we'll see what happens. Because I wouldn't count, most people are counting, or polls in that are counting conservatives out. I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think they're going to win. But I think it's much more likely Carney will get a minority government, as the way things look now. But you really can't trust the polls.
Well, where I'm looking at it is that I'm going to say this, that doesn't matter which party you support. It's no use thinking, oh, it's okay, my party's going to win, I'm sitting at home, I'm not going to bother to go out and vote. No, absolutely, definitely no. If you have a viewpoint, go out and put your vote out there.
Even if you don't like any option, just plug your nose and pick the one you think is the least worst, if you like.
Yeah, that actually is a good question as well. And for example, if you were left leaning, and you, whatever reason, you don't like conservative votes, go and vote liberal. If you're right leaning and for whatever reason you don't like liberals, go vote conservative. Basically it's probably going to be down to that. And that's whereby the polls were predicting in the last couple of weeks about NDP and even the Bloc being squeezed out.
Well, yeah, the Bloc is having difficulty in Quebec. It had to really campaign hard in areas where they were confident they would win. And we have some upsets going on. Like we hear that Pierre Poilievre may have difficulties in his own writing. I don't think so. I do think Singh will have some problems in his writing. He may have some problems in his writing. So, but I think, basically it's a two-party race, and I think Andrew Kaiser has a very good chance of upsetting Baldinelli. Not because Baldinelli is any less popular, it's because that NDP vote will shift to the Liberals, and that may make the difference, because we've had a close call with Andrew Kaiser and Baldinelli before. So the shift of the NDP vote into the Liberals here in Niagara may make the difference. On the other hand, we are feeling the stresses of immigration really bad, and that may make the difference where conservatives come out in mass, or because the conservatives seem to have had better ideas when it comes to immigration, even though the liberals have stole those ideas. So the liberals have stole the idea of axe the tax. They've stole the idea of reducing capital gains taxes, and they stole the ideas of rapidly getting on board with pipelines and mines and all of that. So they've taken away most of the conservative talking points. Carney has shifted the liberals way to the right. Like the liberals were halfway between center and NDP, and now they're much more in the center.
Yeah.
And by doing that, Carney has wisely stolen the talking points of the conservatives. So when people say, well, okay, we wanted to vote for conservatives because they're going to get rid of the carbon tax and they're going to get rid of the the capital gains tax and all that. Well, the liberals just shifted right and did those things anyway.
Yeah.
Even though the conservatives were responsible for that shift to the right. They're the ones that kept pointing this out. Unfortunately for Poilievre, early in his campaign, as pointed out by Doug Ford, they didn't pivot fast enough. They kept doing what appeared to the average people as Trump light, Trump type name calling and that kind of thing. And as the conservatives in Ontario pointed out, you better pivot away from that. That's not going to work. They did, but was it too late?
Oh yeah, and I think that's a big question about that. Is it, was their actions too late? Right.
Yeah, no, I really feel like seriously, Poilievre aside, the conservatives have come up with some very, very intelligent things about the carbon tax and how effective it was, the capital gains tax, how the Liberal government keep turning their back on the West and Alberta oil and all of that, and ramming unrealistic climate change issues at them, and Carney's just taken all that away.
Yeah.
But we have, if you want to look at it that way, we have conservatives to thank for that shift because they pointed it out constantly, and the Liberals could not ignore it when it comes time to election.
Yeah.
So,
okay, so we got one more comment down here. Good morning, Niagara. I hope if you haven't voted yet, vote for sure. Right? Yeah, and of course the other thing, of course, that Karen's not saying, and I'm going to ring her bell for her. Karen says vote Green.
Yes, I don't want to throw a wet blanket on it, but I don't think the Greens are going to win here, Karen.
No,
especially now that you've withdrawn your name.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. All right. Okay. So
that was a joke, by the way.
Yeah, I know. All right. So moving on, the Daily Telegraph from London, England, is saying that Niagara Falls at a breaking point after a surge in migrants. I'm curious about this one. It's a yesterday article, and it's interesting. It's one of these how other people look at us things.
Was this London, England?
London, England, yeah. Telegraph in London, yeah.
I enjoyed reading that because it had a different perspective. It had outside looking in, and when you do that, it gives you a clearer idea of what's really going on here. And when Jim Diodati has pointed out, and we don't hear him express too much here, that he's saying that he's supposed to be an independent, according to this article. Although I think lately he's been leaning conservative. So that basically he's saying like we're stressed right out. We don't really hear that too often. We hear the problems that we have too many migrants in the city, asylum seekers and so on. But we've got 5% of our population as migrants, and it's pushing our our resources to the very limit.
Yeah.
And
Basically, what they're saying here,
that by itself, just the immigration question will be something that Baldinelli can count on. The people who are worried about that will be voting for Baldinelli.
And what they're basically saying is the lobby of the Wyndham Garden Tower Hotel in Niagara Falls at 8 a.m. is busy with chatter of all foreign languages, but yet 5 minutes later, when the yellow school buses pull out, that's all gone.
Yeah, and it shows like when the tourists go there with the migrants, like the asylum seekers go into the basement where they get a buffet breakfast in the morning, and the tourists actually just get toast and croissants or something like that. And it points out that one of the workers in the hotel, who wouldn't give their name, said, I sure wish that I could get a buffet breakfast every morning for nothing. And he's the poor sap that's working in the hotel, making probably minimum wage, and watching the asylum seekers live a pretty nice life. Have a hotel room, have buffet breakfast, got pocket money, and that kind of thing. But what it does, it convolutes a few things there. When Jim Diodati talks about the drug problem, the homeless problem, and those things, those are problems that would have been here with or without the asylum seekers. The asylum seekers don't tend to end up being homeless and that.
No, but they've added strain to our homeless situation.
Well, they've added the influx of migrants into the area where they now start to buy homes and start renting properties. I'm not so sure so many of them are asylum seekers that are doing that. So there's an overlap here. We do have a lot of new Canadians basically coming from Toronto and Brantford and stuff and buying homes here, and then pushing the prices up for people in Niagara. But those are largely not the asylum seekers, and so it kind of mixes things up.
Probably a small number of asylum seekers that have money, or they've gotten money sent to them that are buying homes. Small.
You got here, you had money. Let's put it that way. If you're an immigrant or an asylum seeker that got here, you got here because you had money, because you had to pay the people smugglers. If you can't pay the people smugglers, you're not going to get here. So they had the people that got here or into the United States usually had resources.
Yeah, because you can't take a boat across the Atlantic.
And we're in a situation where we're going to get mobbed. Now, what should happen is the asylum seekers that start coming over the border and claim refugee status or whatever, they have to go through a long process where what should be happening is they should be turned back to the United States right away because of the third-party safe country agreement that we have. However, because we have rules of law and each different person has to be judged whether or not their claim is good or not, that puts us in a position where we're going to be overwhelmed and we won't have the capacity to take care of these different groups. So
Karen raises an important point here. Candidates in the English debate were not permitted to speak about immigration. And I want to know, she wants to know why. I want to know why, because that was wrong.
Yeah, me too. Why they weren't. I think Poilievre's idea of a broken immigration system where it worked very well before the Liberals got in, and their idea of making 100 million people in Canada by the year 2000, and by the year 2035 having 1/3 of Canadians foreign born. I think that was a foolish idealistic notion. And Poilievre pointed out that the immigration system worked very well before the Liberals got in. And that was a talking point that the conservatives could really point out and really make gains with. So,
and it's not a case of, I don't think it's a case of any of the parties being anti-immigrant. It's a case of showing up different policies.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know. I'm just kind of trying to think if the conservatives could dig into Carney's past and find that he's done blackface anywhere, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think so. Somehow that for whatever reason doesn't seem a likely possibility. Any case, we're on election day. There's no campaigning today. There's just getting the vote out today.
Yes, indeed. Yes, and Karen brings up that point. I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware of that. They're not allowed to talk of immigration, particularly.
I think
so important.
Yeah, that's such an important issue that to have been told you can't talk about it. That's problematic.
Yeah, seriously. And we remember during the debates, the last ones, that Blanchet was by the arbitrator of the by the debate leader there, the one was accused Blanchett of being racist, basically prejudged him, and it was serious problem in the debate there. I think that was a CBC. We see this. There was there could have been more judgmental stuff happening if they did bring up the immigration, but that is one of the most important issues. And if it's restricted, that's censorship, man.
Yeah. Okay, so just to finish off the show, Port Coburn is celebrating this week local volunteers. So they daily from 27th of April till May the 3rd, the city will profile different volunteers in Port Coburn's Facebook and Instagram pages. There you go. So this is in line with National Volunteer Week.
Oh, that's very nice. That's very nice that that they're going to, highlight different volunteers along the way. But my problem with that is that there are so many people that get overlooked. Now, when I was handing out checks and stuff, and the Niagara this week was still interested in doing reports on local stuff like charities, Rotary Club would get it, we would get it, you know what I mean? So I got in the paper quite a bit there, but I was the guy that was handing out checks. I was the retired guy that could do it. And so my picture got put in the paper a lot, but there are so many others that don't get that kind of recognition.
I know.
At all. Yeah. Like I had a whole club full of people. Now, sometimes I could drag a couple of them off with me to get their pictures with me, but most of the time, not most of the time, but some of the time, it was only me. And so I wanted to be a representative of Kiwanis, but how do you then say, well, you know what? There's this guy, there's this guy, there's this lady, there's this lady.
I know.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people who, people like yourself, everybody knows that you put a lot of effort into it, and everybody also knows that anybody else in Kiwanis puts a lot of effort into what they do. I'm sure when it comes to, I know that you love to do the bingo calling, for example. It's one of the things that you take a lot of pleasure in when you're actually the caller at bingo. But I also know that you take a lot of pleasure in taking the phone calls as well when it's bingo night.
Yeah, sometimes I work on the phone, sometimes the computer. Last night I was the caller because the caller that was supposed to be there had a grandson that was playing hockey, and the grandson was here in town in and around Toronto and for a big tournament, and his team did very well, which meant that he was playing on Sunday night, and Sandy, who is the grandmother, wanted to go, and so she
family comes first.
So she asked me to take her place, which I definitely would do. Remember too, I'm I'm the easy one they could call when they need somebody on the phones or the computers, or even as a caller, because I'm only 15 minutes away from the studio. Some other people come as far as West Lincoln, so
yeah. And that's a good thing. And you're also a person that's got, well, seemingly boundless time. I know that you've got things that you do, but seemingly boundless time. And
well, sure, because I don't work.
Yeah.
Now there are some evil people that say even when I was at work I wasn't working, but that's not true. I'm telling you.
So Niagara Falls also has a volunteer recognition night. Do you know when that is, Karen?
She hasn't put anything up, but that, the volunteers. I just like to point this out too, though. I'm glad that Port Colborne could do that, but they're a small town, so they can get a lot of people out there. But there are a vast number of people who don't get recognition, but they don't want recognition anyway. I mean, they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
They're doing the right thing, and that's their joy in doing, just helping out. So whether it's Stanford Volunteer Fire Department, the Rotary, Kiwanis, any of them, there are a lot of nameless people out there that are doing a service to the community.
Yeah, we the last one was actually back in November, the volunteer recognition night. Yeah, that was it. November, she said. Yeah, Karen said November. So the last one was November last year. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Yeah, absolutely. That what these guys, what people like yourself do, I think is appreciated by all the community. And volunteerism is a necessity in modern day society.
Yeah, as one of my fellow Kiwanians pointed out, the reason why we're there is because the government can't do everything. So you get the idea that the government has all kinds of social programs and safety nets and so on. They do, but they only have for so much.
Yeah.
Like we've given.
It's the wrong way.
Since bingo has started, there's been millions of dollars from that simple bingo, TV bingo, that's gone back into the communities in the Niagara region. I could tell you that I have collected, when I went in the 7 or 8 years that I've been collecting bingo money, that I personally have brought in, not personally, but I mean my roots have brought in well over $200,000.
Yeah,
and that goes right back in the community. That gets spent in the community. It goes to the soup kitchen,
every bit.
It goes to the Boys and Girls Club. You see?
Yeah, every bit of that effort that you guys put in, your route, the collecting that money, it's an important step. The collecting that money, putting it in, what you do about putting it into the local community, it's important.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we had committed $25,000 over the space of 3 years to the Stanford Library, the renovations in the Stanford Library, and they got all messed up because of COVID, and were over budget and so on, and because of that, we got naming rights to a study room there. So if you go into the Stanford Library, you'll see on one of the study rooms a little plaque that says, Kiwanis Club of Stanford, Canada.
Yeah.
And the one beside it, the Rotary sponsored. So you'll see a plaque for the Rotary on that one.
Okay, Ontario government is promoting the Senior of the Year award. Hey, don't tell anybody. Don't tell Karen. Maybe we should put a nomination up for Karen.
The Senior of the Year award. Okay. Promoting a Senior of the Year award. Well, I know who might win in years past would have been Wilma Morrison, but who is a senior of the year would be? I don't know. Maybe
Across
that guy that's 110 years old.
Across Ontario, yeah, that's a big thing.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't be a candidate because I won't admit to being a senior.
I was just going to say, both you and I are candidates, even if you don't admit to being senior.
Yes.
And I wouldn't, I think there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are more deserving than I am. I wouldn't take such an award.
I'm just wondering who. I mean, there's got to be countless people who would qualify. Oh, yeah. I mean, real prominent citizens that have done great things. Ontario is a huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Worldwide, essential. The Ontario.
And I'm sure Doug has got a few friends in that community as well.
Well, yeah. But this is not political.
I know. I'm being cynical there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's 8:04 or 8:05, so I think we should scram.
So apparently, every city puts forward a name. There you go.
Okay. Who would be ours? I wonder.
That's a very good question. But in fact, actually, if you're talking about, so if every city puts forward a name, that doesn't mean to say that that person has to belong in that city. It's just that the name of the person that they put forward is an Ontarian.
Oh, well, whatever. It'd be interesting to see who comes up for Niagara Falls. Might even be Karen.
Sure. Yeah, Karen's done a lot of wonderful things over the years, that's for sure. Right. Okay.
Wonder Woman.
Yeah. Anything else we need to cover?
I don't know. But
we'll come back to the rest of the news tomorrow.
Yeah. But I'd just like to remind everybody of Gaza that, and I will do that until that ends, because that's a nightmare. It's a continuous nightmare that the West keeps turning their back on, and it's only getting worse. And whereas everybody wants the war in Ukraine to end because there's senseless loss of life, I would like to point out that same situation happens in Gaza now. And so, without further ado, I bid you adieu and pray for